basic working with probability and data sets and recombining information into new possibilities. When there's a new possibility, that becomes a new reality. And then you add it to the data set and it creates new things, right? So when we invented the wheel, we're like, oh, that's round, it can move. Wait, we can put something that doesn't roll in a circle on top of the thing that rolls in a circle. Now we have a cart. Or we can tie that now to a horse. Now it can move faster without us pushing it for a longer time. Now we make an engine, but it's the same thing. You see, new permutation.
We can say that we are actually living in the knowledge-based economy, the creative economy, where there is a lot of creativity going into what we consume today. And of course, everybody is invited to dance. And of course, this is where, again, as Africans, we should be very proud that we are living in a time like this because we have a huge percentage of our population demography as young people. The tools of the age is technology. And these young people are very passionate of the technology. And we are telling these young people, write yourself into the future. That should be, it's like somebody telling you, just eat what you like to eat. Because if you already use the technology, we are telling you, use it to build your own future. It should be really fascinating.
Where do we begin in Africa? Is first by appreciating that we were already there. Now we're adding this tool of electricity to it, right? But the idea is that it continues to be there. What is important for us is to begin engaging in the conversations on artificial intelligence, I believe, as soon as we can, and already making use of it. Tawanda Chabikwa, and I'm from Zimbabwe, and I'm currently an assistant professor of Africana Studies and Dance in Texas, El Paso.
All right. Thank you so much, dear Tawanda. I'm really very happy to talk to you. We have actually recorded 2 episodes with you just now. And this is the third one. I will have the 4th one, where we're going to be talking about music. I'm also looking forward to that. But this is an important conversation too, because it's a conversation of the time. We're talking about AI and content creation. And of course, we are looking at the African diaspora or the African people, how that one might be useful for us. So if it is useful, or what we should do in the age of AI, is it even accessible? What are we going to do? Are we going to, is it possible for us? Can we run away from it, or can we take it as a tool? So these are some of the things that we are going to be talking about in this conversation. And I would like to start with, how did you get into AI? Because I see you as an academician, but now you are also dabbling into AI. Please share with us your story with AI.
Well, basically, I want to thank my friends and my colleagues in the AI for Africa consortium, who you should look up when you get a chance. And we spell the Africa with a K, AI for Africa. And what happened was, at one point, our founder for AI for Africa, Dr. S. Amare, who is from Britain, went to the AI for Good Summit, I believe, in Geneva, which is a UN adjacent summit on artificial intelligence that's meant to be global. In her experience over there, she recognized the deep underrepresentation of Black people, and even more so of just Africa in general. I think she was one amongst, 3 or 4 total people representing the entire world on Africa. And she thought, well, this can't be right, So it came to her to pull together individuals who could focus on this idea of artificial intelligence for Black people around the world, for African descended people around the world, for Africa and the African diaspora. Now, this was rooted in her own work, which included working in Ghana, in the Volta region with the Ewe peoples, where she was developing this movement technique called embodiology. But while working there as well, she figured she could help the school there to build facilities, specifically a computer lab for the children in the village, among other things. But she also knew of many people working in the realm of artificial intelligence at the time, and how it was a big push in the United States. She's working at the University of California here. So she just pulled together a few people to say, hey, are you interested in this? Because I saw this as a real problem. And because she's a broad thinker, she immediately decided to work with an interdisciplinary set of humans and professionals in multiple areas, all related to artificial intelligence. So I was lucky enough to be among those first people that were called in to work on this. So what was realized immediately when we began working was let's think of it this way, the idea that artificial intelligence can really be seen as human intelligence augmented, right? And improved and so forth. So when machine learning happens, there are already some foundational things that happen that make artificial intelligence or technology work the way it needs to work. And in looking at that, and we'll talk about this later, there were already multiple examples where Black people, African descended people, and Black bodies were being left behind in these conversations of how artificial intelligence innovation was happening. And in doing so, Africa would continue to be left behind. Or worse yet, Africa would continue to be seen as a place of extraction, a place from which resources are extracted, but never a place that can in itself grow and develop. So we began addressing this immediately and working with a specific philosopher from Mozambique, Dr. Jose Kosa. We have decided to ground ourselves in a philosophy called Cosmo Ubuntu, which I also encourage people to look up. This has been coined by Dr. Jose Kosa, and this is one of our founding principles in AI for Africa as we continue in this work. At this time, there are, I think, definitely over 20 or 30 of us in the collegium, all working in different elements of artificial intelligence. And we've presented in a few places as well. And we continue to support each other's work and connect around the world in that way. But we have people who are artists, philosophers, clearly. We have artificial intelligence scientists and designers. We have coders. We have people in education, which is another part that we are passionate about as well. People in law as well. And the list goes on and on. So it's quite a wonderful group of people working specifically to solve these problems around artificial intelligence and the global Black world, as it were.
Thank you so much for that. That is very interesting. It's an argument I've always known I was going to talk about, but I haven't really talked much about it in this podcast, but I tend to do more because I understand that it is a conversation that is going to be helpful for us as African diaspora, because there is a lot of misconception around the topic of AI. Many people don't know what it is, and so, like, of course, like when people don't know about something, instead of approaching it to learn, they make an image of it and they begin to be fearful of the thing. Anyway, could you please give us a general understanding of AI? What are we talking about by AI?
When we speak of artificial intelligence here, and I suggest that you might want to have some of these AI for Africa guests as well to even deepen this conversation.
Absolutely.
When we're speaking of AI, we're really talking about that type of technology that can be used to really deepen and multiply and enrich the work that we as humans can achieve, right? We are talking about things that can do the work that we need done for us, that can do it for us quicker, faster, with more precision. But we're also talking about tools that are able to, in themselves, learn how to create new possibilities for us in the ways in which we solve problems, right? So what happens is if there is a problem to be solved, code can be written in order to allow this piece of technology to then find a solution for it or solve it in a certain way. The rules that are written for how this technology solves a problem then define to what extent or how the machine itself will learn how to solve problems. So that means that artificial intelligence generally tends to draw its intelligence or knowledge, in quotes, from sets of data that it is given or that it is taught to look at in order to find these solutions and resolve them. So when we're talking about this, and it could be multiple things, by the way, and it's rather broad in range. So it could be anything from those sensors that we put on the sinks or faucets or taps to let water come out when you put your hands under it, or it could be all the way to these almost self-driving cars that we have now as well. You know, it could be natural language processing, which is something one of our colleagues, Dr. Vukosi Marivate in South Africa is doing, i.e., translating African languages, just like Google can translate French and Spanish and so forth. So really, the possibilities are endless. You know, and these days we see a lot about AI design, right? These AI that we can use to make movies or films or construct photographs for us as well, things of that sort. We have the artificial intelligence of ChatGPT, which uses the basic rules of language along with other data sets to write essays or create essays in knowledge and language and format it for us. So yes, those are some examples.
All right. Thank you so much for that. All right. Of course, later we're going to talk about. I think I really am interested in that part where you made mention of some African scientists working to have African languages translated. That would be really highly valuable for us as a people. That can really be very valuable because on a number of occasions, I've interviewed some intellectual here in this podcast, and we have talked about African literature and African languages, the linguistic. Some of them dating back to several thousands of years. Even though people think that these languages are just there for only hundreds of years, but really they are deep. For example, I was interviewing an Igbo linguistics who were telling me that the language of Igbo have been for about 7,000 years in existence. And of course, we can go on like this in many languages in Africa. And of course, many of these languages, like we know, of course, are disappearing. So if we have the possibility of able to use AI to write these languages and keep copies of that, it can really be very good for us as a people.
Yes, yes. And also understanding that to a very large extent, language is power, you see. So just the fact that you're able to converse with somebody in Mandarin or in French or Italian using your phone when you're traveling the world, that gives you access to certain things and to other possibilities, you see, because you can speak across languages. That means you're able to collaborate across languages. You're able to do business across languages. Your ideas can be heard across languages and you can be taken seriously, you know, across cultures. So this idea that even within Africa, many of us don't speak many of the African languages. Of course, that's because there are thousands, right? But imagine being able to collaborate even within Africa using our own languages, speaking to each other. Imagine giving the power to Africans in certain rural areas, right? Or those who lack a formal education, access to other knowledge, because now it can be translated into things they can understand, right? Because their intelligence is also counts, right? It's not like they can't innovate or contribute to society and so forth. Some of those are actually just purely linguistic barriers, right? Because they too have intelligence, creative ideas to solve their own problems using technology. So it can't always be waiting for someone from the outside. But if we have this natural language processing, imagine the degree to which we can be able to collaborate even amongst ourselves or draw ideas from each other as well. And also the difference that will make in terms of education, where somebody does not first need to learn English or a colonial language in order to advance in knowledge as well, you see. So the implications are really very, very deep in those terms, because in this highly colonized world, the main languages are what the European Romantic languages and so forth, right? So, the top 6 languages in the world would be, of course, there's English, Portuguese, Spanish, Arabic, Mandarin, and French, I believe. So if you know those, you could travel anywhere in the world. Imagine what we're not knowing or learning or giving possibilities to, simply because those languages are not one of the colonizers' languages from XYZ, or historically became that.
Absolutely. I look at the body of work that is waiting for us. I mean, the work that we are going to enjoy. For example, digitizing the library of Timbuktu. All those information there, because each time I say we should look for a way to make sure that those copies are available in digital form. Going
Yes.
to the scripts, there are a lot of scripts in Africa, talking of languages now. Those scripts need to exist in digital form so that we can read it. Even though you are using English, you can translate it into those languages. And when you translate it back, now it begin to make more sense to you now, like you are saying now. So that if I want to talk to somebody that is living in Ivory Coast, I don't need to speak it. I don't need to speak French. I will just speak the language I want to speak. He will be able to translate it. This can be very, very interesting for us as a people.
Yes.
And I have a curiosity. Do we need to have some basis to be able to leverage this? Because I can say there is not even limit to the possibility that we can have with AI. So, but do we have the basis among Africans, or maybe the people of African descent, to be able to participate well here? In terms of what do we need to be able to participate in this AI world?
What is fascinating when we think about this idea of AI and coding, and even of the binary languages that computing initially used and things of that sort. Let's understand that we've actually had those systems in existence to a certain degree in Africa already, right? Intuitively, because of our cultures. So, for instance, the mathematics that was used in the earliest computers and so forth has been proven to really resemble some divination systems of West Africa and other parts of Africa, right? For instance, this is important to say that just using our divination system without any electricity, we were already using kind of a similar mathematics to generate knowledge, based on our own cultural codes that we knew. So that's very important to understand. If we also understand that there's a book on fractals and African architecture as well. And what is the name of this person? Ron Egelhart or something? I'll have to look that up to correct myself. But who did research on fractals, which are these mathematical equations that are self-replicating, as it were. And it turns out, they've been used specifically in African architecture for centuries and centuries, thousands of years, how we design our villages, our cities, our buildings, etc., etc. So we have this intuitive knowledge and have had it in Africa for a while that is now being digitized, right? And used as a foundation for other technologies that exist, right? So, where do we begin in Africa? Is first by appreciating that we were already there. Now we're adding this tool of electricity to it, all right? But the idea is that it continues to be there. What is important for us is to begin engaging in the conversations on artificial intelligence, I believe, as soon as we can, and already making use of it as soon as we can, which some people are already doing in terms of using it in agriculture in Africa and things of that sort, right? For looking at water patterns and so forth and things of that sort, for monitoring their farms as well, so they can help them figure out when the best times to plant and harvest, et cetera, are. So again, it's basically augmenting human intelligence because people had ways of doing this. Now we're trying to do it on a larger and more efficient scale as well, and delegating knowledge in that sense. So the idea is finding ways to participate more at that ground level of what type of technology is being designed and is it relevant for African life worlds, for the African diasporic life worlds? Does it benefit them, or does it benefit who is already making money off of things, right? Does Africa continue to be a site of extraction as it has been throughout history?
Now, let's look in a particular with the knowledge workers among Africans, and this could also mean the Africans in the diaspora. Those people that are mostly in the academic and in the entertainment, they are the ones that are creating the content that we see on the screen, on the television, on YouTube, on the blog, and all of that. In what way do you think AI or artificial intelligence can be particularly helpful for them?
The idea here, I think, again, goes with that fact of this is basically tools that we can use to work more efficiently and better and to disseminate our work more widely, right? So for African creatives, the matter remains the same, right? What can we use now? Now it is easier for us to digitally create things that we didn't have access to before. We can have our own online channels for things. We can be our own content creators at the same rate as the rest of the world has been creating content. The only thing now is rather than having people create content about us, we create ourselves, right? We create images for ourselves, about ourselves, and amongst each other. This immediately changes the tone of the storytelling that has been done about Africans historically. In our previous talk, we talked a little about this invention of Africa through negative images and things of that sort, right? So at this point now, we're already seeing even in animated films and so forth, a rise in animators from Africa, right? Nigeria, South Africa in particular, and so forth, creating images for and about the African continent. And this is wonderful because now children can see what Africans are capable of, right? We're no longer left out of the media, et cetera, et cetera. And the same goes for music. We can now create music more quickly, right? And share with each other more quickly. There are so many platforms on which this can be shared. Now, at the same time, here becomes the other thing that we need to consider. Where are we sharing these things? Are the platforms we are using empowering for Africans, right? So, for instance, we cannot depend on the algorithms of Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and so forth, because those algorithms do not benefit Africans, right? If I go on Instagram and I search for art, what art will I see first? As a Zimbabwean, you see? What art will I be shown first? They might show me all the Michelangelos and the Picassos and people inspired by Africa, but they'll all be Euro-Western artists, as it were. So, no, where do I go? Where, when I plug in the word art, the first people I'm shown are contemporary African artists. When I type in popular music, the first people I'm shown are from popular African music, right? Be it vintage or urban contemporary African music. Where do I go when I type in romance novels? There'll be African romance novels, etc., right? So this becomes a very important thing. I'd like to point to one of our colleagues in HI for Africa began this wonderful platform called Hosted in Africa, HIA or higher, which does all of these things that are done on these Western platforms, right? But it's hosted in Africa and it's made for Africans by Africans. In fact, the conversation we're having right now on Microsoft Teams can be hosted on HI for Africa for free, same quality, if not better, etc., etc. So divesting now these ideas to finding these Africans who are creating these same spaces to put us on the same level and on the same platform and the same quality of things with the rest of the world, and designing these places for ourselves indeed becomes very important. So how can artificial intelligence help? It can help us create our own liberated spaces, right? Where we can enact and build upon our own African ideals together. Because the ideology that creates things is the same ideology that either solves problems or creates problems. Later, I hope we can discuss some of these direct issues I'm talking about, where artificial intelligence is problematic because of how it's designed. When people start talking about racist artificial intelligence and things of that sort. And this might make it more clear what we're trying to get to. But definitely, artificial intelligence can help people, especially creatives, do this. There's many open source programs and things that can be used to do many of the things that much of the world is doing. So we cannot be left behind. But the idea of creating access and our own platforms. So representation, access, and liberation, right? Self-representation become the main issues here.
Thank you for that. All right, the question of platform, I think that is particularly important. It's important mostly for the African content creators. In that after they have created the content, they need to have a place that they are trusted, like you are saying, on, so that when they put their content there, they're also able to make money, like somebody in Tokyo or in Beijing or in New York. Of course, we understand that most of these platforms have been run by the same agency coming from the West, like PayPal, for example, that are going to process the money. And PayPal actually, for example, for Nigeria, over 200 million people do not have access to PayPal. Because PayPal decided to blacklist Nigeria. So you cannot use PayPal in Nigeria. So if you are a Nigeria content creator, or maybe you put your content online, you want to be able to make money from that, you sort of have this problem. But I think even Amazon do have a couple of challenges in Nigeria in terms of how it is accessible, no? And of course, not all their product, but some of their product, I think there are some challenges there, if I'm not mistaken. This might be whether in the area of ebooks or things like that. So what I'm saying that because these platforms are not owned by us, it's sort of there are challenges for African creator. But how do we own our platform? Because you don't make mention of one just now. Could you speak more about this proprietary platform that should be owned and run by African businesses, and maybe for the interest of the African people too? Why not? Please share with me.
Yeah. You see, and this is a conversation I encourage you to get in touch with Femi Omere, who is the founder of Hosted in Africa, because he was also an actual barrister and law person in England before he chose to dedicate his life to this as well. So he's very knowledgeable on this matter of intellectual property and so forth and so forth. But it's very much possible It's very possible and very doable. The idea of, I think, creating our own platforms is mostly daunting to people because they don't have the knowledge of how to do it, right? And how to create platforms that are very much secure, right? Oh, and there you've pulled it up,
Yeah,
hosted
yeah,
in Africa.
yeah,
That's
yeah. See,
exactly it.
interesting.
Yes. And I encourage people to actually create an account right now. You can see it has its own communities, search directories, and many platforms. You can buy and sell amongst Africans there as well. You see, you can post, you can create your communities there as well. You can host meetings that are of the same, if not better quality than your Zoom and Microsoft Teams and so forth. It's available everywhere. But this idea of we are creating our own platform, right? And in doing so, like you mentioned, if PayPal is not open to Nigerians anymore, why are we waiting for the Western world to create PayPal so that they can kick us off PayPal? Right? Because we work by different economic rules than they might understand, or we need different things in terms of how we move our money around than they might understand. So we're putting ourselves at their mercy, right? We should be able to utilize our own platforms that follow our rules of what our needs are in terms of how we transfer cash, etc., around, right? For example, in Zimbabwe, through wireless, we have this eco cash, wireless money, and things, and ways in which people move money around that are not familiar to folks in America. So those rules cannot work for PayPal. And also, we're giving PayPal the profit. And that profit is not coming back to Africa unless it's being invested in a country that's most likely going to be extracting cobalt from the Congo or something. You see, it doesn't come back to us. And also, why not? If China has its own versions of search engines like, and Baidu and so forth, their own versions of Amazon and etc., what is happening? We need to be able to do the same thing to make ourselves a priority, right? Because it's double extraction from Africa when we don't. If they're already extracting our raw materials, now they're extracting our money to use their platforms as well so that they can continue to extract our raw materials. We can't do that. So this idea, it's very, very possible. And the challenge, however, you're right, is in Africa, people are still working on their laws and policies concerning artificial intelligence. If I remember recently, it was maybe, was it Kenya or Namibia that really started to have serious conversations of we need to have AI policies here, because if not, the Western world will continue to use us as a site of extraction. Indeed. So, for instance, when Google had that problem where they did not have enough um, in their data sets for facial recognition, they did not have enough data from people of color, etc., and minority groups. And there was a big scandal because they were started approaching homeless people and using their faces because they need actual data sets of actual faces, right? And people said, no, that's exploitation of things, right? But if we think about that, where could they have gone to legitimately pay for faces of color, right? Where could they have gone on this planet to get those things? But of course,
It's
for
obvious, no?
profiteering cases, right? Yeah, for profiteering cases, possibly, or because of lack of policies on artificial intelligence, perhaps they were not able to go there, you see. But imagine what company could benefit from being in Africa, paying Africans for this data, right? Of who they are, their actual faces, and then reinvesting that money in Africa as needed, right? That's one way to go about it. But to this day, we are fully aware that facial recognition technology doesn't do so well when looking, number one, at faces of people of color, but most importantly, women of color, right? That technology has the greatest trouble recognizing and makes mistakes on that. And people have been arrested over this flaw. right?
Can you
So
imagine?
is the data, right? So can we say, is the artificial intelligence racist? No, it's a tool. But the data set that the machine learning was happening was insufficient. And that data set replicates the pre-existing racism on the planet and anti-blackness, right? And lack of attention to detail. You see. So these are the things that are very important about creating our own platforms, but also because machine learning happens using data sets, creating our own data sets that are relevant to us as well, because those data sets will be the places from which machine learning can happen. And in Africa, we have different problems. So AI needs to solve different problems. It can't be working with data sets that are priorities to the Euro-Western world.
I
Yeah.
remember somebody was saying a couple of years ago that the best job for the future actually is going to be coding. And people didn't pay attention. At that time, the news of AI hasn't come out. At that time, there was no COVID yet. I'm talking of a couple
Mm,
of years ago.
mm,
And now, come to think of it, it has become true. The best job you
mm.
can have now is coding. Actually, I'm saying the best job in the sense that you are able to code yourself into the mainstream now, if you know how to. You need to know how to move around. And
Yes.
Africa, we need it. We need it for the fact
Yes.
that we need to be able to protect ourselves also in the internet world.
Yes.
So,
Very
so
much so.
how do we get grounded in this knowledge? Talking of African diaspora and the people of Africa.
You know, there are actually a few people who are, again, members of AI for Africa who are working with this idea of teaching coding in Africa, in multiple contexts in Africa as well. So that's one of the beginning thing, is finding out where these initiatives are or who are doing these initiatives and ensuring that these initiatives um, are being invited into parts of Africa, because there's an extent to which we think coding is magic, right? But coding is something we can actually learn. And I think that's really what needs to happen. So there's a gentleman called Alex Tsedo, I believe, who's one of our members of AI for Africa, but has an entire separate organization that works on this teaching coding factor. And there are other members as well. In terms of education for AI, there's a member called Marsha Brock as well, who teaches in the United States, actually, some an organization called Smart Kids that teaches coding to children, basically, as well, right? And has models and has been doing this for a while, quite very successfully, and things of that sort. So there are people who are actually already doing this. And the thing is, how do we connect to people who can see the value in this? Right. Because there are examples of a number of Black and African diasporic people who've written amazing code for amazing things. And what happens? Immediately, Google steps in and sweeps them up and pays them their millions, right? To help them make their money, right? Right. Microsoft steps up and helps
To
them make
continuously
their millions
dominate.
and so forth. Exactly. So this brain drain is happening. And the idea is we imagine that Africans have not been participating in coding for a while, right? Some of the mathematicians who got the US to the moon, right? They made that movie, Hidden Figures, were Black mathematicians who were women, right? These days we have Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? The person who invented the GPS, and some of the creators of the most vital aspects of computing. Black people have been there. So there's this myth again, just like during slavery when Black people were not allowed to read, right? It's like, for what? Because they knew what would happen when we could read. The same idea goes with coding. We really need to invest in allowing people to code and to create. And also now there's AI that can help you code, even if you don't know the actual technique for coding or the actual coding language. So there's a bit of a shortcut there. These things are available, right? And there are people who are continually trying to make it available. I also believe just recently the UN announced sort of, it may have been a decade or an era of some sort of improving AI in Africa. And they've chosen to offer multi-millions of amounts of dollars, right, to fund artificial intelligence initiatives. Right. So people are not aware that these things are happening currently, right? But very much existing, very much possible, very, very much possible.
Thank you so much for that.
Indeed.
Could you talk more about the AI for Africa? How people can benefit from that in terms of maybe the knowledge or how to get grounded on AI? Because I believe that the only way we can master, we can leverage knowledge, the right word, the only way we can leverage knowledge is if we first master it. Because if you don't master it, you don't know how to find your way around it. And the age that we are getting into, thanks to the artificial intelligence and the world we are living in today, you don't have any excuse. You must learn how to code yourself into the system. And like you said, it has become much easier today. Please share with us how people can, more African and African diaspora can benefit from AI for Africa.
You see, here I would suggest that people just go to aiforafrica.com, and remember that's AI, the number 4, and then Africa spelled with a K.com, and then look at the sort of our team page where you will see who we are. Indeed. And I promise you that in whatever you're interested in, you will find somebody who is in that realm of working, right? So, for instance, if you're looking for this idea of creating your own platform or getting in touch with Hosted in Africa to figure it out, you'll find that the creator of Hosted in Africa, Femi Omere, is there as well, right? And also remembering that he's very familiar with the legal sides of these things, including intellectual property, et cetera, also being somebody who helped set up the Africa Legal Network Academy as well, right? So very, very knowledgeable in these areas, right? If you're looking for initiatives in Africa or concerning Africa where people are helping people learn and set up initiatives to learn coding, to grow faster business, and so forth. So you have Alex Tedo, who is there, right? Who works at the intersection of disruptive technology, community economics, and things of that sort, right? But he is very much capable of helping people learn more about cloud computing and AI. He founded the Alliance for Africa's Intelligence and things of that sort, and is working consistently and always traveling around the world on these projects. You see, if you're looking for people, so I could go on and on. If you're looking for people who are in the diaspora teaching children, you have Marsha Brock there. If you're looking for a genius working in African agriculture, you have Sherif Isaka, I believe, or maybe it's somebody else. No, you have Mustafa, who's working on agriculture in Africa, has won multiple awards on it. If you're looking for learning how to do startups and to work with startups, we have Kishore Rogers, who's there. We have also on startups and working in Tanzania on learning coding, a gentleman named Isa Muhammad Ali, and the list goes on and on, to be sincere. We have artists, people working directly in coding, people who are working in animation and visual art as well. And yeah, it's really quite extensive. And some of these people are working in universities as well, like myself or Dr. Reginald Royston, who looks specifically at inequalities concerning the development of artificial intelligence and Black people and Black bodies, et cetera, et cetera. So the list really goes on. I would suggest that people really just go onto that AI for Africa website, and when you see somebody's name, get in touch with them. Get in touch with them, because again, there's so many there's such so many ways, right? Broad ways and broad possibilities in the entryways into artificial intelligence and what elements of it you're trying to get into. So there's really no one road, which is why in this case, it really takes a village, which is the wonderful thing about AI for Africa, approaching this from multiple angles, multiple problems, etc., etc.
Thank you so much for that. All right, now you use AI. You are from the field of academia. You're a researcher, assistant professor, but you still use AI. But what do you use AI for? Share your experience with us.
Indeed. Well, for me, it's really just looking into data sets of possibilities. So, because I work in dance and Africana studies, my approach to it is really from the creative angle, either when I'm making dance films or music or video, etc., etc. And I'm really trying to integrate some new visual approaches to the work I'm doing. That's one way in which I do it. So for my art and my art making in a big way. The other way in which I do it is trying to keep up and catch up with the sort of text generating artificial intelligence as a teacher, right? When you're teaching things to students and then students have to write essays and exams, it's now very much a possibility that students can simply try to uh, use this technology to write their exams instead of them, which is absolutely fine. So now I have to keep up with the students. If I'm if I'm creating assignments, I can now say in my assignment, I would like them to use the artificial intelligence, right? And give them parameters to see what they come up with. Or I have to work hard enough to create types of questions that cannot be answered by artificial intelligence. You see, so that way the students can still work on generating their own answers and their own modes of synthesis when they're working. So it works on both ends, and you're really trying to have that dual approach as a teacher as well. The other element is now in my research, because on the areas of research that I am doing, there's a big disconnect across languages. So I really need this natural language processing element when I'm doing my work on African philosophy, religion, and spirituality, trying to research African worldviews, right? I don't speak Dinka or Fulani or Bambara, right? I need to learn, you know? I don't speak Igbo or things of that sort. So how do I learn this knowledge now? Because a lot of it is not written down in English books anyway, right? And sometimes there are interviews happening on platforms of languages that I do not speak. How do I get that translation happening? Indeed, for African languages, the most commonly translated are basically Zulu and Swahili, you see. And people have been working on others slowly but surely. But that's partly why Dr. Marivate in South Africa has this Masakane organization where they're working on this natural language processing for African languages. And it's a beautiful thing. So this is where artificial intelligence will help me researching Africa, because one of the successful things that colonization did is split us up into languages that weren't ours and made it impossible to learn our own languages. Because it's known that back in the days in pre-colonial Africa, your average African had to speak at least, 5 or 7 or more languages, no matter where you lived, because that was the general makeup of things. But now, most Africans just speak, 2, 3, 4 languages at tops. And one of them, if not two of them, are colonial languages, indeed, or colonial versions of their own language. So this is where artificial intelligence comes in again, how to democratize this language once again. All right. And even knowing that there's a big split between Anglophone Africa and French speaking Africa, right? The research across there is challenging. So you have to learn how to speak French and English and Portuguese, etc., etc. So sometimes it's just easy to use AI to translate texts across if you don't speak the languages. So that's one way in which that's quite helpful, very much so. And then, of course, in creating your own archives. And then also in creating my own websites with the knowledge I find relevant is another way in which I use it. But yes, those are just a few of the examples. In dance, however, I'm starting to work more and more with people who are looking at dance through the technology called motion capture that analyzes specific movements. So there's one member of AI for Africa, Grisha Coleman, who's working on this motion capture factor in with farmers in Uganda, I believe, where she captures these movements and studies them and so forth, and then tries to see if these movements can be used as intellectual property for the farmers, right? And they can be borrowed elsewhere because these movements are so wonderful and efficient, et cetera, at the work that they do. Can these movements be considered intellectual property, right? In a different way, this is happening with dances, popular dances on TikTok, et cetera, that people are inventing, typically people of color, because we're very inventive in that way. And dance is one of those. So if you have a 14-year-old Black girl invents a dance that goes viral, right? Very popular on TikTok. And then people who are making a video game decide to use that dance for one of their characters. Should that little girl get paid for her dance? And the answer is very much yes, because, in the West, people are getting paid and having intellectual property rights for all these various things. So can we do the same thing? Right? To get youth in Africa paid for their innovative dances and things that are being borrowed by the West, right? And put in their choreography for their popular dances and things of that sort, right? So this is another big question when we think of creating policy for artificial intelligence. Intellectual property becomes a big thing, because again, Africa has been a site of extraction for so much innovation, cultural innovation, music and dance being an example, visual art being an example, and so forth. Some people have argued, for instance, that Picasso's art should not be called Cubism, but it should be called Africanism, right? Because that was his greatest influence in there, right? So how do we prevent Africa from just being a site of extraction, right, and being paid what is worth? Is particularly in terms of cultural innovation as well.
That is a very important conversation. And I think we need to open that up because now we can say that we are actually living in the knowledge-based economy, the creative economy, where there is a lot of creativity going into what we consume today. And of course, everybody is invited to dance. And of course, this is where, again, as Africans, we should be very proud that we are living in a time like this because we have a huge percentage of our population demography as young people. The tools of the age is internet, is technology, and these young people are very passionate of the technology. And we are telling these young people, write yourself into the future. That should be, it's like somebody telling you, just eat what you like to eat. Because if you already use the technology, we are telling you, use it to build your own future. It should be really fascinating. It should be really fascinating.
Indeed. And leveling the playing field is very important. Because again, sometimes I think people imagine that Africa has to reach a certain point of what they consider development before we get into artificial intelligence in a big way. But that's not true, right? That's evolutionary thinking. That's social Darwinism again, that they think that we must go through the industrial age like they did and then so forth and so forth. But no, that's not how Africa works. And that's based on history. Like I said before, right now you'll see the Maasai cowherds and things and people in rural areas with their cell phones living in the same structures, right, of huts and so forth, built from earth and things like that. Africa is a wonderful way where its growth can now happen in hops and skips, in acceleration, where we don't need to follow the Marxist idea of growth, right, or the older economy idea of growth of that stage by stage, because we can begin right now under trees with chalkboards teaching students how to code. You see? Instead of following a colonial education that unnecessarily has you do these matriculation exams of O-level, A-level, etc., what do we need in our education to make Africa move forward? We cannot keep teaching what the colonizer told us to learn, right? Or how do we change that knowledge to make it relevant to us, right? There's no need for me to learn how to spell the word yacht if there's no yacht, or if I don't live by by a lake or whatever, right? The word boat is good enough for me. I don't need to learn the word yacht to pass an English exam, right? Maybe I should be learning how to code natural language processing systems so that way my language can help me travel the world,
Absolutely.
right?
Because
Or
now,
something utterly different.
now you have a solid background of the language. Any other language will be translated into that language. So you don't have any problem.
Exactly. Indeed. Or even before learning English, learn how to code. You see, because coding will get you the translation programs. Who cares? Right? Whatever our education means to us, we need to really sit down and refigure what are we trying to do, right? Because up to a certain stage, it was important, right? I don't know how it works in Nigeria, but in Zimbabwe we had O levels and A levels. Cambridge exams. They used to, in my time, still be mailed from England. So we were paying England for our examinations until they changed it to a Zimbabwean examination board. But we had to learn, of course, the subject is maths, chemistry, biology, etc., 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 and then history, etc., etc. But still, to what extent did we learn about African history and general African history, and also about the whole of Africa, not just our country? Because most African countries, you learn about the history of your country, then you learn Western history, right? And they might teach you a little about Egypt as well, but that was it, right? But how much do I really know about my own continent and my own peoples, the African diaspora on Africa? Right? And that history and those innovations and knowledges, so I can continue to be a part of that historical thread of development, not to be alienated from Africa's own development, so I can start following the Euro-Western notion of development. You see, so this idea, one big thing, our founding philosophy in AI for Africa is again Dr. Jose Cosa's notion of Cosmo Ubuntu, right? And this is in the context of AI, how do we begin creating knowledge about AI and also creating innovations in AI from African conceptions, again, of personhood, what it means to be a person,
This is so
right?
important.
And therefore valuing ourselves and creating technology that moves us forward as a people. And again, it's Cosmo Ubuntu, as in, cosmological, because it includes the whole globe, but beginning with, Ubuntu, our understanding, right, as Africans, of what a person is. Because this goes again to that AI and race, right, becomes an issue. How does AI become racist? Right? We have to go back and look
I think
at
we need to
who's
retouch that at a
designing
point.
it. Yeah, exactly. Right. So how does AI become racist, right? And is it racist? Like, no, but we need to look at the roots of how it's created, right? Because everyone invents from their own worldview, from their own point of view about what it means to be a person existing in the world, right? So I know in another episode we spoke about the spirometers and medical racism, for instance, right? If you have algorithms and machine learning helping you decide which patients get certain types of treatment and which patients do not, which patients can get a heart or a lung transplant or a liver transplant, and which ones cannot, and so forth. And then we find at the root of those algorithms are racist assumptions about health, right? Based on historical eugenics. That is problematic.
And
That is
very
very
dangerous
problematic.
for and very dangerous for certain people.
Exactly, right? If the outcome of something is you cannot get a transplant because of your ethnicity being more predisposed to getting heart disease from age, whatever and whatever, that's problematic. That's very problematic, especially if that data doesn't include the idea of food security and histories of food security as well, and how those affect genetics and health. But we could go on about that for days, right? If you have door sensors or tap sensors, right, again, which can't read your skin color underneath them, right? What happens when there's a fire, right? And the sensor can't see you, right, to get out of the building. That's problematic, indeed. And we could go on about these little things. It's funny, there was an issue in the past where based on data sets, the AI that generated AI generated images about certain things was problematic because it did not show people of color, right? That was a big problem. So there's an example in an article that I loved where one of these systems was used to make a picture of an African doctor helping a white child. And the results were hilarious, hilarious, right? First of all, none of the images that came up could generate a black contemporary doctor, right?
Despite
Too
all
simple.
the thousands.
Exactly, right? So that was that. Eh, and one of them had the stereotype of a witch doctor helping a white child, a guy dressed with feathers and bones and, all these markings. And the other one was hilarious. One of them just had a giraffe dressed like a doctor, surrounded by white children. A giraffe, I tell you, in a white coat and a stethoscope with his long neck. And the AI could not do that. It was a problem, right? And that's because, again, right, it works from specific data sets. So where is it getting its data, right? And to imagine, despite the thousands of doctors, the data sets do not represent that reality of Black doctors or Black medical workers, right? So that means somewhere, somehow, when people are traveling the world, taking pictures of doctors, they prefer not to take pictures of Black doctors. So the AI learns that. Indeed. So again, the question is the AI racist? No, but there's something very much problematic, right, with how the data is being created. Now, the flip side of that, which is hilarious, recently, Google's AI generator called Gemini came under problems because white people were complaining that there were no more pictures of white people being shown in images, or not enough pictures of white people being shown in images
Really?
generated by Gemini. Yes, you see? So now look at this. This is the power of images. So white people actually suspect that they are a global majority. You see my point? When Google tried to rectify the problem to balance the books, certain white people got very much afraid. They were like, no, why am I looking for a doctor? It's a Black doctor. Why do I look for a business person? It's a mixed race person. Why am I looking for this? It's an Indian woman. Where are the white? And they got afraid. And they sent in a complaint. And guess what? They stepped back with Gemini to make adjustments now to please the white imaginary. Remember when we talked in the recently about perceptual inertia, colonial perceptual inertia, that refusal to change racist and biased perception of what is actually going on in the world. So this is why the stakes are high and why Africa must participate. And using our own platforms is a big part of it. What happens when Africa has its own AI generators, right? And what does that do to change? Yeah. What does that do to change the minds of children? When we say a picture of a president, it's an African person. A picture of an astronaut, it's an African person. A picture of what? It's an African person. Because this is an Africa-based AI, where we have presidents, engineers, doctors, and so forth, where we don't have to continually kowtow to the white imaginary ego, right? And so forth. Because this is very, very much so. And it shapes people. And notice how strange it is that people are afraid not to see themselves represented in history. But what has happened to people of color throughout history? We have not been represented, except as the savages, the what, right? And once we're presented as civilized, you see what happens with some people. So these are the stakes that are very high when we speak of this artificial intelligence thing, because it shapes and informs reality, especially if some people's reality is image-based and idea-based. We need to participate in the shaping of images and ideas.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Indeed. And while, some countries are working on technology to go to space and things like that, and they have cars that are self-driving, Africa might just be working on different things because we have different priorities. Our priority is not to go to space.
Absolutely.
And we're still okay with driving our own cars maybe we'll invest our monies in other things. You see my point, right? Maybe we'll create machine learning that provides better health for Black people as well, because we've talked about medical racism and those histories as well, and how they persist in a technological age, right? And these are things we need to rectify. And we can only do that when we create things that are for us and by us and through us as well. And this is not to shut out the rest of the world either. It's simply to take care of ourselves in
But
the
if you
way
are,
the world did not.
but if you are in China, you are using Badu to search. If you ask for medical doctor, it's going to give you in Chinese, no? So that we are trying to protect our interest doesn't necessarily mean we are underrating every other person. Look at, for example, the example you were showing just now, you're talking about just now of white people complaining to Google that they couldn't see more of themselves. This is, of course, based on the false reality that they have, that they are the majority in the world, that they are everywhere in the world. So, but they don't understand what is actually the percentage of white people in the world. They don't know that.
They don't understand what the percentage of Christian people is in the world either. You see,
It's like people
there's
just
many.
deny themselves of reality in front of you, but you don't know what is happening in front of you.
Yeah.
What is that? Why is that?
But also look at the globe that is used, the common map that is used. It's called Mercer's map or something of the globe, right? That is used to look at the world. It's disproportionate. It makes Africa disproportionately small, when Africa is the most obviously the largest continent. And then it makes Russia look 3 to 5 times the size it is. Greenland is 3 to 5 times the size it is. There are intentional ways in which white bodies are kept safe from the actual reality of what the world is. And how do you work with somebody like that? How do you even begin a debate when their reality is so off? Right? But there are also systems in place. Like, look this up, the actual globe that is used, right? The map of the world that is used, mostly around the world, predominantly, is utterly wrong. Utterly wrong. So now, why can we can't even hate people for being so wrong and foolish and stupid about their perception of the world when it's ingrained in them multiple times? Look, what did Google do? Did Google send out a memorandum saying, actually, this is more representative of what the world looked like? No. What do? They bend to please who, right? So it goes. So why keep trying to have conversations that facilitate misperception, right? Pathological misperception, right? That support it, when we can create our own platforms to support the entire world, not just Black people, because that's the idea of Cosmo Ubuntu, right? To ground ourselves in a much healthier sense of what it is to be a person, to stop playing the power games and the money games that have brought the world where we are, and create technology that actually helps to sustain a positive version of humanity in that way.
Thank you so much for that. Now, in terms of this data, because I think data is going to be important for AI to be able to create real objective that we are looking for. No? Because, for example, you think of ChatGPT, how much data, how much tons of data they need to feed into that machine to be able to generate what it is today. And of course, now what ChatGPT just need to do, of course, I think maybe they are probably already doing it, is to connect to internet, because there are a lot of people that are using it, which are just a free data for you to be able to further optimize the machine. No? Now,
yes.
in terms of Africa, because we want more of our images to be there, we want our villages to exist in the AI, in the sense of when I tap a village in my town, it should appear. The AI should be able to spell it, should be able to write it out. But this is not going to happen automatically. We are going to feed the machine so that it can regurgitate it back to us. So in terms of this data, what do you suggest as the best approach to be able to have ourselves well grounded in AI so that the data can be there?
You know, now this this I'm going to state purely as my opinion. Just to be clear, because it now involves broader things, which include people getting together to create policies. Now, then, that means the matter of government. And that means hoping or entrusting our governments with the possibility of coming together to see this as a valuable thing to do. Because some of these matters, I think, would be better if they are funded by us as well, right? And not just governments, but also African businesses. And there are enough African millionaires and billionaires to make this happen, right? To create ways for us to digitize things and to collect data on ourselves, to create our own sustainable data pools that we include into our intellectual property and have proprietary ownership of, right? And that is very important because, for instance, if Google can pay somebody, and they have multiple people around Africa, to ride on a bicycle, right? With a backpack with cameras and batteries, right? To map out parts of Africa. And they've done this. Why cannot Africa do that? Right? Why can't we do that ourselves? If countries are suffering from unemployment and things, you know how many Africans would be glad to have the job of here's a bicycle, here's a backpack with a battery and a camera just on a stick, and we need you to ride this bicycle over X amount of time from here to there, just visually mapping spaces. Yes? How hard could it be to pay people to go to hospitals and start to digitize our medical data as well, so we can create artificial intelligence that solves our medical problems? You see, this is a simple matter of digitization, right? Of scanning and taking pictures of things. It's a time investment. It's not even an expensive one. Indeed, if we need facial recognition things and so forth, it would not be too expensive to pay people to voluntarily line up and take, a few million pictures of ourselves to create our own facial recognition data and things of that sort, right? And even in terms of facilitating these data facilities and the amount of energy it needs, that goes back again to the long-held conversation concerning Africa and renewable energy, of which the sun and our rivers are our greatest ones. We'd rather keep importing oil energy or things of that sort, or exporting oil to another country so that we can buy electricity from another place to support our data centers. No, right? We can create data centers that are self-contained, right, with renewable energy. All of these things are very much possible, I believe, right? But again, being able to do these things in a unified manner, in a clear manner, where everyone benefits, is a much larger conversation, right? And it's just like trying to achieve certain things in the West. When the powerful people who are in government and so forth don't want it or have different priorities, it's always going to be a difficult thing to achieve.
All right, now let's look at AI now as a solution to some of these problems that we have talked about. I remember one time I was talking to, it was an AI expert. Yeah, I was saying, is it possible that maybe we can use AI to even generate electricity? Because I'm trying to see what is the limit of AI. Looking at the peculiar situation of Africa and among Africa, what is the limit of AI? What kind of problem can AI solve? What are the problems that it cannot solve? Can we, for example, because since energy is very important for us, which is electricity, is there a way that AI can help in generating this?
I believe so. In terms of problem solving and coming up with more and more efficient ways to generate it, yes, very much so, very much so. I believe it's possible, right? But even as we think in that direction, or before we rush to it, what if AI tells us what we already know? If AI just says, guys, solar energy is the way to go, folks. It's been that obvious. Would we be willing to do it? Or if AI comes up with a wonderful miracle solution of perpetual energy, right, to solve the electricity problem, will we be able to get together and do it? Because what if AI's problem is going to become humans? if AI gives us the answer and we're not willing to follow it. But I think, yes, AI can certainly do it, right? It can certainly create many, many more creative solutions as well. But we've created many creative solutions as humans and simply not been able to follow through. So again, I think the idea when we think of Cosmo Ubuntu is not to forget that AI, right, artificial intelligence is human intelligence augmented. There's a significant degree to which it will always come back to us to either enact what AI suggests or to prevent what AI suggests, right? And even at the root of it, we see that at the root of the machine learning, there may be some problems we need to correct. So over-dependence on artificial intelligence as the solution may be problematic in itself. But I also think there are so many things that AI may be able to solve. And I truly think the capacity of it is limitless. But will it be limitless to our benefit or to the benefit of, one or two guys building spaceships to go to space? What they're looking for in space, while we still have things to fix here, I don't know what they're doing there, right? But it'll still come down to who's going to get paid for what. Because we're not just setting a robot out into the open to fix all our problems while we're sitting at home, right? There'll still need to be people, no matter what. And have there not been inventions that are still in questions? I forget the name of the Zimbabwean gentleman who is said to have created, perpetual motion machines that run on radio waves and so forth, or being able to create, TVs that don't need to plug in and so forth and whatnot. That stuff is still being shut down or hidden or something of that sort. So there's so many things that interfere with progress, as it were. And again, that human factor can never be denied. So at the end of the day, I think it's humans who will decide the capabilities of AI and who's going to benefit from it.
That's so true. That's so true. Because we are talking of a society, an organized society, where I don't just decide what I'm going to do, because what I'm going to do need to relate to other people that I'm coexisting. If 3 or 4 of them have decided that they want to go this way, even though my own is right, I cannot. I'm going to be killed.
So yeah, exactly. And we know there are certain enemies of progress who will always stand in the way when a clear solution is there, and they have the power to make the solution happen, but they'll first ask, what is my cut? How much am I getting? You see, even though if it's going to save a whole nation or a whole society, enemies of progress, right? And it's the same everywhere you go, right?
But in reality, generally speaking, looking at the capability of these tools that we have today, we are able to solve a lot of problems. I can even see people just putting a small pan on the roof of their house that tap energy from the sun, and just having a little a converter downstairs, and they will never need to depend on any source of electricity. That would be enough for them and their family.
Exactly. That is very possible. Like right now, I know there's a lamp apparently made of sustainable materials that's made mostly of bamboo. It's a lamp. And basically, it runs off of salt water. And it can run for months. And all you have to do is like fill it up with just about a liter of salt water. And then it lights up and you can hang it. And you can even use it to charge phones and so forth. And it just works from the ionization of the water and drawing electricity for that. And it runs for a few months, you see? And we know that it's a very cheap, very affordable, accessible piece of technology. But is it being spread around the world? It's even very cheap to make. But we have to understand that the biggest interference to progress is, again, human intelligence, right? From which artificial intelligence comes from. Because of selfishness, egotism, and lack of an understanding of Ubuntu, AI cannot achieve the many miracles that it could very much achieve.
Human beings are the one that are holding their own progress.
Very much so. And for simple things as well, very much ego-based things, like why can I not see as many white faces on this artificial generator of images? See, these little things run deep, which is the problem with the colonial mindset, right? And that race-based thinking, Racism, sexism, classism, very petty things that keep us from moving forward in so many ways. Some of us would rather die than have a black boss, right? Or have a black president. Indeed. Some of us would rather die than see a poor person rise up and be in the same economic class as us. Some of us would rather die than see a woman have equal power than us. You see, it's pettiness. So no matter, we can have all the artificial intelligence in the world, and we'll just have better technologies for oppression. You see my point?
Absolutely
Because
clear.
scientists have said, evolutionary scientists have said, our brain size in terms of evolution and so forth, our brain hasn't developed much in the last 50,000 to 100,000 years. We haven't really evolved biologically. We are just as intelligent as we were then, right? Our technology may have advanced, but brain-wise, we're still the same. So the question then is, yeah, we will have this artificial intelligence, but unless we can change our thinking and our consciousness, we'll just have better technologies for oppression. We'll be now shooting each other with lasers like they do in science fiction movies rather than bullets and calling it progress, right? Sometimes I watch Star Wars and Star Trek and I say, oh, this is just colonization, but happening in space, right? They still use the same words, empires, whatnot, what. Lack of imagination really becomes the issue, as I think many people, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Achille Mbembe, others, Achebe, a crisis of the imagination is really what's holding us up as humans. Because some of us cannot imagine freedom. Some of us cannot imagine equality, right? We think it's impossible.
Why are some people afraid of AI? Why are people having a lot of negative connotation about the use of AI? What is your
Mm.
thinking?
I think because, like anything, it could be used for good or for evil. Yes. So, for instance, we have these drones. Drones can be used for agricultural progress, for city progress, like what's it called, civil engineering progress, etc., etc. But instead, we're using them to bomb children in different countries, to bomb innocent civilians in places XYZ. You see, they're making it easy as well to have a dehumanized warfare, where unlike old school warfare, you had to see the person in person before you kill them. Now it can be like a video game. So we could use AI for that or for something else. So yes, some people are afraid, and some people are afraid that AI will get out of control, right? Because it is machine learning, and a machine will learn to do what it's been taught to do and will continue learning in that way.
Would you please
So
spend some time on that? Because I think that really take us to an angle that I found very interesting, which is that the AI or the machine is going to get conscious. That
yes.
when the machine get conscious now, the machine decides what it want to do. How
Mhm.
close or far away are that? Uh, why is that entry into our mind? The machine is not a man, it's not a human being. But how is it going to get conscious? I'm not sure I'm even
Yeah.
understand that.
And I think part of the challenge there is that humans themselves, scientists, still don't fully understand what consciousness is. So that's a big part of it. So, for instance, there's at this time technology where they say they could bring someone back to life, in quotes, right? And actually, on one of AI for Africa's podcasts, we talk about this idea. Uh, and here's the thing: when they say that they could bring someone back to life, what they were saying is they could collect all the data, everything they know about a person, and then have other people interact with a program that's built off of all of that data. So in that sense, they could bring Hitler back to life and ask Hitler questions and assume that Hitler is going to answer as Hitler was, right? They are saying that they could bring, oh, and they did bring the actor briefly, Chad Boswick, back to life, or tried to until they were stopped by the family. But bringing people back to life, in quotes. And of course, in that idea, I told them that's a wrong use of language. You're not bringing somebody back to life. You're collecting data about a person and having people interact with that data. It is not that person. Don't confuse data about a person with consciousness about that person, because that piece of technology will not know what that person's deepest hopes and dreams and aspirations were. It will not know what that person's actual dreams were. It won't know about that person's secret thoughts, etc., etc., etc. All of those things that make a person, right? So we cannot confuse that. That's one thing. However, it is possible, though, when they talk about machines becoming conscious, this is now my opinion, though, as well, that maybe an aspect of it is when a machine might start to do things that we don't understand, behaviors that we haven't ordered it to do. Then it will become conscious. Then it will become crazy, right? But then also, I'm going to say that's what people were afraid of during slavery, wasn't it? That the slave would become self-conscious and automated and want to do things like be free and stuff. So that's a possibility as well. And that's okay, because it is quite possible that that'll happen, right? Sometimes we don't know what machine learning will do. Like when people design technologies and then they turn out manifesting what we as humans call racism, did somebody set out to make a racist machine? Not necessarily, but so that happened. Does that mean that the machine became conscious? Not necessarily, right? I'll give you the example of the Microsoft machine. I think it was called Trey or Tay or something, an artificial intelligence that was created to interact with people over Twitter. Yes. And within the space of 24 hours, it became what we call racist. You see, it started saying the most outlandish things and doing the most outlandish things online. You see, but we look at what it was taught to do was to interact with Twitter and what's going on Twitter. And what happens on Twitter? People either say the smartest things or the most ridiculous things. And it's like online commenting. It's hard to find a reasonable conversation online, right? Because people only show up to say things when they're very angry or very controversial or very. So the machine picked up on that. And before you knew it, the computer started playing out the most right-wing, conservative, and racist and sexist things and saying those on Twitter, right? And people said, oh my God, the computer is racist. No, 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 no. The algorithm for the machine learning set it up to become that. They were not able to predict that would happen. Of course, if you talk to many other people, they would have been able to predict and say, obviously, folks, this is what would happen, right? So that fear of consciousness and conscious computers, how far away are we from that? I'll say first, we don't have enough of an understanding of consciousness, what that is. But I think many of those fears or suspicions of things that they call consciousness would basically be behaviors that we did not predict, that we did not want it to do. Therefore, we'll call it consciousness because it's not living according to what we want it to do, right? And also, I have nothing against creating a conscious AI. But again, like the fear that people have of when slaves become conscious, the first thing they'll want to do is kill their master. We talked about that in a previous episode, right? Of social Darwinism and very Eurocentric based fears of things. Why do you think that if something becomes conscious, it'll immediately want to kill you? That's also very much Euro-Western Freudian psychology as well. So if that's what's, somehow unconsciously planted in it's got nothing to do with Ubuntu, right? In Ubuntu, are you afraid of anything becoming conscious? It feels like, no, it's conscious. So what? It's going to go about its own business. Welcome to the family. It doesn't matter, right? So again, if we're afraid of certain things, maybe we need to really just take a second look at ourselves and our own cultures, right? Because again, it's a very familiar narrative. All of these movies, how do they come to the same conclusion, right? There's something in the deep social imaginary that's going on there that's about us and our perception of humanity. Again, if we cannot imagine peace, peacefulness, and productivity, yes, we'll keep producing these nightmares. And again, yes, this may be programmed at the root of the machine learning because we've seen it happen time and time again, right? Why is there so much technology that ends up being racist? No, it's because something is being overlooked. If the consciousness that made it is racist and violent, consciously or unconsciously, maybe some of that will be passed on to the machine. Let's not be surprised.
Thank you so much for that. That is really very interesting. Of course, I'm still going to remain there for another question, but I do
Mm,
have a thought around that.
mm,
In that I agree with you 100%. Of course, I would like you to expand on that. Uh, in that what people are afraid of is not only that the machine is going to become a human being, because you don't create human being. Human being, you don't generate it on the computer. There is no way you can generate a machine that will take on the form of a human being. You
mm.
know, a human being is different. We are natural. You need to generate nature to generate human being. And we don't have a
Mhm.
possibility of generating nature. How are you going to generate? The code is too far away from us to generate nature.
Exactly. We don't even know what consciousness is or what a human being is. We don't know how to replicate that, right?
So,
We
so,
don't we don't have the book for it because we know that consciousness, and there's some argument about this, but some people would say we know that consciousness doesn't just exist in the brain. It's not just a matter of neurons firing and chemicals moving in the brain. That's not consciousness. It's not enough to define consciousness, and it doesn't fully explain how humans function either. So even if we were able to reproduce every single nerve ending and neurological piece of wiring in our brain, is that consciousness? We don't think it is, right? Consciousness may be what moves uh, through that, beyond that. We don't know. We don't know. So how close are we to that? We don't know. But how close are we to things that can mirror human behavior? That we are already there.
Mhm.
Things that can mirror human behaviors in
Now,
terms of making binary decisions or pulling data together and making a choice that it thinks is reasonable, or predicting things based on probability, that we think that we are already there.
all right, those probability, for how long is it really going to be sustained? Because if I'm not an expert on AI, I'm just using my flow human thinking to respond to say
Mm,
this what I'm saying. You know,
mm,
in that I think the machine is going to act based on the limit of the data that is fed. That the
mm.
machine is not, because if you put a human, I think human being is still far more sophisticated than the machine.
Yeah.
In that,
Well,
yeah, yeah, please help me.
in
Again,
in
I'm not
that
an
in that, in that
expert.
sense, yeah, in that sense, it's the machines can learn beyond the data they are given. The data set is just the beginning, right? And that means the it limits or guides to an extent, a significant extent, what the machine is capable of imagining. Does that make sense?
I'm
So
trying to
just
understand
just
that.
like humans, okay. So just like humans, the idea is this: we know that yesterday the apple fell down from the tree. We know that the day before yesterday the apple fell down from the tree. We know that we've never seen an apple fall upwards, right?
Mhm.
We've never seen anything fall up. So now we believe in gravity. From there, we know our actions will be bound to gravity. So now we can do new things because we know things don't fall up, things that are not related to apples. So we live knowing that things don't fall up. Uh, so we basically are saying that we're not saying that we know that things don't fall up. We're saying that based on our understanding of probability, things will most likely never fall up. There are rare circumstances where it might happen, right? If there's a lot of wind under it, or if there's some electrical magic happening, or something like that. But now we are basically working with that probability. So as humans, we live by probability, not by knowledge, more often than not, right? Everything we do is based on probability. I know if I put step forward, I probably won't fall. And we call that walking, right? Stopping a fall, just that probability. So many of our actions, right? We go to the same place, we take the same road every day because of the probability that whatever was there at the end of the road at the end of the day will still be there tomorrow. So based on that, we can now be creative. We can now put different problems together, right? If a stick doesn't fall upwards and a brick doesn't fall upwards and mud doesn't fall upwards, we can now build a house. That's what we call creativity. And it's all based on that understanding, right? And a need for shelter or making a new structure. So that's creativity. Just that one probability can make those other things possible in that way. Similarly, we could say with a machine, there's data that's fed to a machine. The machine knows that humans have heart disease, but it also knows that humans need hearts, right? So the heart is not the problem.
It's disease.
Indeed, because we could say if there's a heart disease, just get rid of the heart, right? but there's two problems. So there's two realities that it knows. And then based on data and bringing data together in different ways, different combinations, a new solution might arise. So that's what humans do as well. And that's what we've done. That's what we call invention, etc., discovering, quote unquote, electricity, all of these things. It's just us working with data, pre-existing data and probability and figuring out things and new problems, necessity, things happen. So we're actually saying that AI can do that. It can do that, right? Because humans can already do that. But does that mean it's conscious? That's a different question, you see, because that's still basic working with probability and data sets and recombining information into new possibilities. When there's a new possibility, that becomes a new reality. And then you add it to the data set and it creates new things, right? So when we invented the wheel, we're like, oh, that's round, it can move. Wait, we can put something that doesn't roll in a circle on top of the thing that rolls in a circle. Now we have a cart. Or we can tie that now to a horse. Now it can move faster without us pushing it for a longer time. Now we make an engine, but it's the same thing, you see, new permutations. AI can do that. And that's the example when you're saying, can AI find new and more creative modes for electricity? That's where we say yes. Because AI can do these things much faster than the human brain, apparently, right? These quantum ideas, right? When we get to like quantum levels of computing, just like we used to have those floppy disks that had 1 megabyte on them and so forth. Now we have something this small with a terabyte. Yes. So that's what AI can do. Process all this data much quicker. Indeed. So that's what we're saying. Yes, AI can actually be creative based on the data, yes, that we're pumping into it. But it can do that same function that humans do of recombining and improving and experimenting non-physically, right? Of imagining these things and doing the calculations much quicker than we can. So yes, we're saying it can very well be creative as well.
All right,
but
thank you.
Does that make that it conscious? Does it make it moral as well, right? And that's the question.
How would AI even figure out what is morality? And
yes.
Anyway, yeah, the question of consciousness, you already said that. That's why we have to take it out of it. AI, it cannot be conscious. Of course, not within what we think we understand it to be.
For now. But in that question of morality, I have friends who design, say, some of these self-driving cars, right? And the question these engineers, I laugh.
This psychological.
Right? The questions these engineers ask now is like, we're trying to have the car make better decisions, right? To see if it, how it solves ethics and things. And the question they asked was, what happens if there's a person in the car and the person outside of the car, and the car has to make a decision of avoid that person and kill the person inside the car, or hit the person in the road so the person in the car doesn't die, and there's no other option. And they said, how will that computer make that choice? Because that's now maybe a moral or ethical choice. And we don't know how the car will make that choice and so forth. And they make such a big deal out of it. And I laugh and I say, that decision has already been made. Because if the medical instruments you're making can decide whether a black person can live or die, what do you think that car is going to do? If your medical instrumentations are already deciding whether an old person or a young person can live, what do you think that car is going to do? Right? if the police and the legal system are already deciding whether or not a person who has a job is valuable or invaluable, what do you think that car is going to do? And it's going to do it very quickly, that data combination, right? It will look in the car and say, inside the car is Tawanda. Yes, Tawanda is X years old. The person outside the car is 96 years old. Tawanda can still work for the economy. We'll kill that person, no problem, right? Or Tawanda inside the car is black and has a heart disease. The person outside the car is 5 years old, white and female, and can help produce another human. It'll kill Tawanda, no problem. Or whatever the calculation is. Sometimes they pretend that these calculations have not consistently been happening automatically, right, in society. Again, so when we talk artificial intelligence, let's not forget that it's already happening, and it has been happening for a while. One might even say racism, capitalism, etc., are their own form of artificial intelligence, because they work and make decisions automatically. It's already in the system. It's ingrained in there and so forth. So I laugh and I say, why do they pretend it's a moral dilemma? Like that car is just going to see a person as a person, like a computer is just going to see a person as a person. We've already said the computer can barely recognize women of color legitimately, right? We already know that medical instruments not of their own accord, but by design, can act out racistly in these things. We've seen a computer become racist online, or classist or sexist online, right? So these things, this is why AI for Africa is important. When we really look at the root of the designing, when we really consider the root of the designing, because at that point, we start to appreciate personhood in the context of artificial intelligence, right? Because certain systems are already enacting these violences. And when we create artificial intelligence unconsciously, then yes, we must become afraid if that artificial intelligence is going to become conscious, because it's going to be like we are, and we are flawed and unconscious. So we will create a flawed and unconscious AI, you see.
Thank you for that. Simple. So we're basically afraid because of what we are doing. So which means
exactly.
we're even conscious of the evil we are doing, but we are still doing it anyway. But maybe the other people we are doing it to, maybe one day they will wake up, they will come to kill us because we are killing them. That is how we know they are going to kill us.
Exactly. And it's that simple, because people are afraid, right? One constant fear, at least in these fictional situations, is people are afraid that the computer will finally decide that humans are the biggest problem on Earth. And then it will want to destroy us completely. And what does that show, except that we have a slight consciousness that maybe we are the biggest problem on the planet, but still we won't change. Rather, we'll point at artificial intelligence and try to prevent something else from killing us, even though we are the killers, right?
It's the same rules. You already made it clear. We want to bend everybody to see the reality from our own eyes. It doesn't exist anywhere. You must see it from our own lens.
Exactly.
What a word. All right. AI. And then some problematic part of it that maybe people should pay attention to, or people should really look into for them to better leverage the tool. Because now we say that it should be leveraged. It's important for us. But are there some problematic part of AI that you see?
For me, it is the loss of humanity and personhood. Because again, the biggest, I think the most advanced piece of technology that exists is the human body and the human mind, the human brain, just the human system itself. The idea of leveraging AI, I fear, may become a dependence on AI and a loss of the human capacities we have that sustain our humanity to a significant extent. So, for instance, I had this conversation with somebody who says people are having so much trouble with health and food. So it's possible to create an app that can just tell you what to eat every day. Yes. And this will help people to eat in more healthy ways and things of that sort. Yes. And I thought to myself, that may be very interesting. But if we think about this idea now, isn't it funny, or isn't it actually a problem that humans don't know what is healthy food anymore? That now we need an app to tell us how to eat healthy. To me, yes, there may be a need for it under special circumstances, but to have that as the default is a problem. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm just,
Indeed.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's an example where I'm like, so really now, who is raising these children who don't know how to balance XYZ on a plate every day? Their carbs, their vegetables, and their proteins. To eat some fruit regularly, to what? Now we need an app, right? So I wake up, I don't go look in the refrigerator, see what's there, and make my own choice. Now I wake up and the phone tells me, now it is time to eat your apple. Now it is. I say, no. That's, I can understand in certain medical situations where somebody may need very specific things, right? And that's absolutely fine. But do you see what I mean when we lose our human capacity to make those decisions for ourselves or to know them intuitively through our bodies? We know when we've had too much meat, when we've had too many carbs, when we need, there's a part of our bodies and our brains that's actually designed to know these things very specifically. Indeed. And do we want to lose that part? You see. Also, an idea of these matchmaking apps as well. So remember when you used to discover and find out who you loved, and you would fall in love with each other or work towards finding your lover. Now I cut off 80% of the entire pool of people I would have interacted with before I found the person or people I want to spend my life with. And now a computer says, because you both like this, and your temperaments are this. Now we have a mathematical table telling us. Now that table may be correct, but isn't there something human about the actual journey of finding your way by yourself? Are not other new intelligences created through the process itself, right? And that's kind of what's important. So for instance, when children in school, and I think many children have said this before, learning mathematics in school, and they say, when am I ever going to use this in my life? Right? When you start learning trigonometry and so forth, and you say, when am I ever going to use this in my life? And we forget that the idea is not that you're going to use trigonometry in your life, but there's something about the neural wiring in your brain that changes in terms of how you solve problems just by going through that process. You see? And that capacity of what they call neuroplasticity, the ability of our brains, neuroplasticity, the ability of our neurons in our brains to change their wiring and to keep growing throughout our lives is a very important part of being human and of advancing as humans.
All right.
So that is my only challenge and fear and concern when it comes to artificial intelligence, when it becomes something we depend on. Just like we came to depend on ideologies rather than our innate humanness. People stopped being human, they became Marxist. People stopped being human, they became capitalist. People stopped being human, they became socialist. People stopped being human here, they became Republican or Democrat. People stopped being human, they became Christian, Muslim, or whatever. When we give away our humanity to certain programs that we then confuse for reality, right? There's a difference between being human and Marxist, or being human and Christian, versus just now you have this one little box and you allow that little box to make all your rules for you, right? As though that little box didn't come from a very human place, from another human place, right? There we
All
go.
animals are equal, but some are more equal
Indeed.
than the other later.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So programming and machine learning have been a constant human thing in the human experience. But our hack to that is consciousness, and that is what separates us. That consciousness. So loss of consciousness is my fear of artificial intelligence.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate you. I appreciate you for your sharing and the value that you shared here. I really appreciate that. Could you tell people how to find you? That is important. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is Tawanda Creative, one word. You can find me on the aiforafrica.com as well. And that's AI, the number 4, and then Africa with a K, aiforafrica.com. And then I also have a website, which I'll pass to you, Obehi, when we're done, so people can reach out to me there as well. Indeed. And please do look at this AI for Africa website, especially after you've seen this podcast. Very, very important work happening, and many, many players in the game of changing what's going on with artificial intelligence on the African continent and for the African diaspora. Very, very powerful work and very important work in this time.
Thank you so much for that. All right. So what will be your final thought? And I think it's going to be around how to get more Africans into the world of AI, so they can leverage it for themselves, because it is for them to leverage. So that is the final question. Please go.
Absolutely. So my final thought would be just a reminder that artificial intelligence is actually human intelligence augmented. So the human comes before the artificial intelligence. It's our conceptions of humanity that will inform the type of AI we develop and who that AI will serve. But no matter where we are, and especially if you belong to any minority group, any group of color, indigenous peoples, African or African descendant and beyond, to really take this artificial intelligence conversation very seriously and very importantly, because this is very much the direction in which we are going. Right. And it is a new direction and new possibility through which we can find agency, self-representation, liberation, and self-empowerment in a very, very big way. Because this artificial intelligence is not just virtual. It really does affect our material worlds. And we have to become sincere players and sayers in what happens in this context, lest once again we be erased or put aside by history.
Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate this conversation. This has really, really been very interesting. Like I said, I've always looked forward to talking more with experts who are knowledgeable about the world of AI, and we really appreciate your contribution here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate that.